Good evening, and thank you all for joining us on this Facebook Live event hosted by Mangala Shubhuti. We are gathered here because today is the official release of Dzigar Kongtrul Rinpoche's new book, Peaceful Heart, the Buddhist Practice of Patience. I am especially excited because the Buddhist wisdom and deep and special practice approach of patience is of course needed every day on a personal level to protect our tender hearts, as Rinpoche explains in the introduction of this book. But also it seems particularly timely right now in our current times to have the perspective and wisdom of Shantideva so explicitly and clearly set forth by Kongtrul Rinpoche. When you read this book, you will without a doubt see how truly relevant these ideas are for any human being, regardless of your background or culture, both as a means to work with your own mind and as a very valuable skill to work well with everything we encounter in our worlds around us. Rinpoche, I want to thank you dearly for writing this book, as well as all the teachings you have given on this subtle and perhaps sometimes overlooked and maybe even undervalued topic. I can say personally, these teachings have changed my life for the better and continue to do so every single day. We especially want to thank Rinpoche for agreeing to take a few moments of his time this evening to say some words of introduction from his own side on why he wrote this book and the value of practicing patience and what that means to you, Rinpoche. Thank you, Rinpoche, once again for being here with us.
Shabje bima dituma me mala ngo rabdi de gosum gwa jumbe janza lu sende zamdo ma den je jabje kangi gazon da me ngon gazan zumbe na na yuen zumbe so zundu so ando gom ge du je jo tu yen da ma ko ne de juren sum je juen to an be ma ka bo shebe de ren da lu benzo jo o jen so ne be me dom bole je ve nyu go ran zo no je do zun be yen de Bemanjune dalu benzo juan zamlin zibe jindu junye dan tu jilong to nyambe tong aya na tu tong bebe tu gyu je konde chugo do balong chen ba de me uze kala chung za lo de ne nang da kunja zen zen tube bole ra do wa jume do do no long zong ze yung zen do jin zen la so na da man dun ji de me sa me ni long kun nam ju jo ga den go yemen zen ga ge wa ju bra jim ze ga la so an de ki za kun zen do la to me was saying do den zo za long jen nang ge nang jo ba an ji me ling de kala jen za lo zu kun je be man ju ne ta ye me de jen san je ling bai yan du be be nam jo zo lo an ji me tin le o zo zo an de ba ban ji de wa zo du je do ro wa ta ling de be de ben jo on de zi den za long jen ji me je ve ni go zo an de zu sun je ve ji zo be man ju an ja lu do ji kun yin be ma la ye me du ji don du be 민주 남게 도르제소 안데 자세 군제 두바제 볼랑 임베선 조선 베소 지긴도네 다연로 와라 든든jel로 마소 먼저 견나던 동에로 강알에 나베 만주네 셴보데 뉴선절로 도르제가 안주미기 도제소 안데 소다제소 보쇼 알라 노도르 베원소 상반조 동아른 롱 안주미 주제 왕보소 안데 뉴선은 zel라당간도 예수나 보모분도 소니 준제가 와두난데 배마면서 겨라서한데 파유 두벨로 보면 저기에 간준제 마양어 저정제 된데 군지 주제제 볼라 이미 진제 왕보 시자 군제 윤된 점도데 제벨롱데 루드테이가 군자다 배만까지 왕점이 근다 지모 진고르군다 조지도제 장주거 반점에 구인바 간지 지고 접지데 진제 주줄릉 메겨라서한데 동자 모르겠는 선라래 공부로네 보베다 진제 알론도 좀 안지다 맨저다 소한데 오지는 저 모든 오지 기도 주지 승연도네 봐 유네노 어디나 메가라 소한데 건데 주고 사진 보도 나저도 봐선다 인수세 란도 주고 공원요 봐 강하게 베도르지 소한 주jen도 바로뇨 문간도 히엘로제르 뭔가다 인소야라도 와주면 롱존제 롱도데 메니마스 산조 진공은 좀 베마라 공산 주도 말롱제 봐 이메나 경보소한데 두베지도 노버스 Sida Jasa Jujilo Duja, Nandalo Benjamarkini, Santo Kabala, Ninis on the Dajus. Dara Gedi Jamsa Jesus on me to bed and out of some Z and all of us and Jimmy Jinzi was there, so on there, the men of the Lama dance, and the Lam let them become money, the men of them Judas. Long to Kiduni Mazo and they are on a Dunya going to do Jimmy Duga and to kids and all of the Kinjin and just one day, Lama Jubelamada and Demelamatsera Lamala, can just do Junet. Zinine go be the huge, so and so to Ginger, doesn't do Elona. Chula Joran Zedo, so. Hello, everybody. It's my great honor and privilege to be able to present you with this new book on the patience called Peaceful Heart. And I want to thank Joy, who is been my editor and who has added many of my books from various teachings that I've given on the Bodhisattva Avatara, the Bodhisattva's way of life over the years. And then particularly on this book, Joy has, of course, added, but then Jennifer has done an immense amount of work going over and over and over and supplementing many other teachings that I've done in different places that she has notes. And therefore, she also equally, or if not more, put work onto this than myself and Joy. So therefore, the book, I feel, has become much more richer and smoother to read. So I want to thank her also. And then I also want to thank the publisher, the Shambhala publication, for really being interested to put out a book like this and to be able to accommodate us with most of what we want. And so they've been incredibly flexible and a very great company to work with. So I want to thank. And then I want to thank you all for coming today, because today I believe is the day when we are launching this book. So that's why we are doing this, and they wanted me to say a few things about patience. Now, it is not that I have perfected patience and therefore I wrote this book, and or I have some great deal of stability even in the works of being a patient. But nonetheless, I think it is my great aspiration and my great really admiration, aspiration to have more and more patience in my own life, in my own mind. And I just as wrote here, I see having a more patience is going to be a more of a peace in my own life as I age, and as we all age, and we all faces various turbulences in the world, as well as also in our own lives, like what we all this year have faced with the COVID pandemic. And then also, of course, due to that and what has also brought things into our own personal lives, normally, as well as particularly in these lives. Also, when I actually meet with the, people who are patient, I really see the inconsistency between myself and them, and how they are so much further in the real, genuine progress of the Dharma and the practice, and as well as also, therefore, what that translates into their in their lives, in their mind, more of peace and more sanity and more greater depth of joy to live, as well as also much of an also if they are a practitioner and if they're working on the bodhicitta, much more bodhicitta coming through in their speech, as well as also in their actions, as well as also in their outreach. And so we only know, what we need when we are in presence of those who are much further, and much greatly advanced than ourselves, to kind of see where we are. It almost very loudly speaks to us right away, or that we have a big ego, and that we have a lot of pride, and that we have a lot of pride-related, very strong kind of resistance to just be very easygoing, or just be very carefree, and just very smooth in our relation, whether it's like a half an hour of spending time with somebody, or whether it is just a day of working with somebody, or whether it's just ongoing, just a continuation of a pleasant relation, without any hiccups or without any problems. Usually, when we self-reflect, we do self-reflect, and we do self-reflect to kind of try to know and try to understand where we are and what our flaws are. But sometimes it's difficult to kind of everything become clear to you, But when you are in the presence of someone who's actually much further beyond, or much further accomplished in the practice of Dharma, then all what is inconsistent between the person who has in front of you, who is in front of you, and then yourself, speaks out very loud. And that could be a very good teachings. So whenever I'm with a person who, first of all, my own root teacher, and then all of my teachers, never really in my life have seen them get so mad and angry and upset and totally kind of lost it as we usually do, and they are always, very patient with the situation, whether it is with myself or whether it is with any of other my colleagues who are students of them. Being very, very, we could be very naughty, and we could have done many kind of naughty things, but always takes it with a great kind of humor and sort of laughs or smiles or even if it is something unpleasant, never being scolded right there then, or with a great kind of sharpness or anything like that. I'm talking about Khentrul Rinpoche, my own root teacher, and then the most that he would actually be is that he wouldn't say much, and he would just keep quiet. So, not with the great teachers, but with the other, people in the world who I think are just working on themselves and have got the by the power of working with many different conditions, which requires a patience as a key element, and then therefore they have developed patience. Therefore, they are very peaceful. I can immediately feel the sense of the kind of peacefulness and how their mind is much more in the state of great joy and state of great, humor and an ability to enjoy life. So I'm also in that way very, admirer of people who are very patient. I'm not that impressed, I would say. People who may have other attributes, but who actually loses their temper all the time or gets upset and angry. I'm very much fearful of those and kind of have a little bit of a sense of apprehension to come close to them. But in the case of people who have patience and patience really comes through in their being, I'm very attracted to them. So, patience, therefore, has been an aspiration for myself, just as the bodhicitta has been an aspiration for myself to cultivate and have a much of an unconditional sense of universal love in my heart, and try to really sort of hold that as the most dearest thing in my own mind and life, to practice the kind of what we call the tseva, being the heart of everything, what we do in the spiritual path, the tender heart, tseva being translated as a tender heart, or tseva being translated as an love, universal love. And then therefore to try to sort of have kind thoughts, kind emotions being expressed to all living beings across the universe, and compassionate thoughts, compassionate feelings being emitted from one's heart across the all living beings in the universe. And then try to sort of really do some tonglen, taking the sufferings of others. Since you are suffering, you have this nature of skanda right now that is suffering. So whether you are suffering in alienation unrestricted way, just with your own singular self, or just courageously take upon the suffering of the whole world, on top of what you are suffering, mentally, with a sense of courage and sense of really, it's not going to add up anything more, than what you already are in this condition. And then thus, hopefully, relieve the beings from the suffering. And you could actually, in the imaginary way, do that so with the Tonglen practice, with as much of a depth of a compassion that you could actually generate in the moment, or what you have already generated in your mind. And then also really give your physical, verbal, mental, three doors, any ability in the service of the living beings. And then also anything and everything that is precious that you might have claimed also to be in the service of all living beings. And then the merit that it might be accumulated, also trying to offer it to all living beings. And then do that with whatever amount of the loving kindness that you have been able to generate it before, or in the moment you feel it, just when you feel love and kind, you be generous. So just offer that. So these are the sort of bodhicitta element, traditional bodhicitta element that is very, very, in the times of my own need, when I get so kind of closed into myself, and when I just kind of only am concerned and paranoid or anxious about, any very situation, and then you're not even self-aware that that's what's taking place. So when you are on the cushion, then you cannot continue that. So you have to be able to break yourself out of that. So you need that kind of a real traditional method of coming out of that within a deep sense of conviction that, this is the way to kind of break out of the bubble of your own sub-absorption. But of course you need also courage alone with that. So in that way, then really whatever that was happening in the sub-absorption bubble, it's sort of like not intentionally trying to pacify, but just changing the course of your mind and heart and how you operate. It just naturally dissolves most of the time. And it's a very powerful, in that way, just in the nutshell, the practice of the bodhicitta that I'm talking about. So that's been a very, very important and greatly, over the years of practicing, how much I have got out of that. And I have gained more and more conviction and more kind of a sense of how that is the spiritual path. Beyond that, the kind of anything else is supplementary, but this is the core. This is the core, so I really appreciate the Dharma in that way, as a sort of a medicine that is not for the physical, but for the mind and soul, or for the heart and brain to be somewhat, in the kind of a disturbance, to like a boiling water. If you put in a cold water, it will just calm itself down. So there's a lot of value in that way, in the kind of practice of training in the tenderness, that the previous book, or what I have also tried to kind of put out for the audience to have some connection, and as well as what I appreciate in the Buddha's, particularly in the Mahayana teachings, as for people to also have some glimpses of that. Though, of course, Mahayana teachings is going to be much broad, and this is going to be very much essence and a drop of that. So, patience practice is then a sequel to that. A sequel to that, as you could do that, and you could value that. That meaning the kind of tseva to be in your heart, and tseva to be always burning, or aspire to be burning in your heart, and the warmth of that stays in your heart to emit out. But if you don't have the company of patience, it's very difficult for that not to die out, because there's a lot of sometimes, that, as we know, happens in our lives, that we have a lot of, negative response, or negative reactions. And when we do have a negative response or negative reactions, as what we see is happening, that we think is, not, cool, or not right, or not, for example, in the case of myself, I'm a teacher, Buddhist teacher, and when actually, someone who is a student of mine, and have been a student of mine for a very long time, and I'm expecting, a certain kind of understanding of the Dharma and the practice of the Dharma, and also the kind of the integration of the Dharma with their mind and life, as I hoped, or I thought was there, and then all of a sudden the person acts out in a different way. My mind gets very confused. I go through a lot of kind of sense of, what is this? How could this be? And how does one not behave better than this? Or how could somebody act out so kind of, after so many years of talking about the flaws of ego, and act out so egotistically, and so kind of toot your own horn, and sort of think that that's, attractive or something like that, So a lot of judgments come. I think there's a lot of also, sometimes I would say maybe perhaps my own kind of expectations being a little bit shattered and disappointed or whatever. And then, I start to get a little bit irritated, or a little bit sort of like, a feeling like, I need to kind of confront and say things, in a sharper or more sort of stern terms, that this is not right. But then I realize, Dharma is not something often, you could force it on people. people have to observe the Dharma in their own mind, in their own time, in their own ways, and it takes time. It takes time, and 20 years actually is not that long of a time for that to happen, or even 30 years is not that long of a time for that to happen. If 30 years is just as much as we know, if we can observe the kind of Dharma in our mind, and we become completely integrated with the Dharma, then it's not going to take very long to get enlightened. It takes a long time, according to the Mahayana teachings, 3 countless eons to get enlightened. So 30 years, 40 years is arbitrary. It's not actually that long. So when I think that, and then mostly, just looking in my own mind, my own ego is involved there. My own sort of judgment is involved there. My own kind of like, when you lose the patient, there's always, according to the Shantideva, according to this text, you want something, and then that's not happening, and then you're upset, that's how you lose your patience. Or you don't want something, and then that's happening, and then you get upset, and that's how you lose patience. So exact what's actually being spoken in the teachings in the patience chapter, it's happening. And I myself am not actually integrating the teachings, and I'm also, sort of reacting. So in this kind of in a way, when you are able to self-reflect and see, and then take really the blame on yourself, to sort of really be more, this is not the fault, this is actually fault of yours, not the fault of others. Whatever is happening, maybe it's happening, but at least losing your own kind of a patience here is not the fault of others. It's the fault of your own, And so, this is actually a good chance for me to practice and also be more patient and try to sort of have a more sense of a kind of at least to say humor about how I'm reacting, and not sort of burn any bridges or say any sharp things or do anything to sort of like, that can cause pain to others, including just maybe feedback. So in this way, I've learned a lot how to, in many ways, be patient, being a teacher, and it's been very, very helpful, because before being a teacher, most probably I wouldn't have this kind of opportunities. And then being a teacher, I think I've got a lot of those opportunities. And especially I have a few that is around me that actually my, are T-boys, and they're my teachers, more likely, it's in that way, teaching. So what's the outcome of that is you really become more peaceful. Just not in these times, in this kind of isolated events. Just in generally, I'm noticing I'm a little bit more peaceful, and I'm much more able to kind of, have a more kind of a peaceful mind than before. Of course, it's all relative. It's all in comparison, So I'm relatively speaking from how my mind was when I was younger, much younger. And then, since I've come to be more in this position and also working with the students and then learning how to be patients. And also trying to kind of find ways to be more sort of not disturbed. Of course, incidents have contributed for me to have a more peace in that way. And then that, I feel, is a great gift. It's a great gift of a deep peace that cannot be bought, cannot be borrowed, cannot be mechanically, just construct. It has to come from your own deep sense of, interest and a heart in patience, and what the patients can offer, and what patients can maybe bring you in your personal life, So in that way, then more and more I got interested in the patients, practice, and particularly in this book, as in this book, it will be speaking about, as you read, if you do read, we lose our state of calmness because we get disturbed. Why do we get disturbed in the first place? Of course, there's the self. It's not only there's the self. Self is always there. Even with the people who are patient, there's the still self. But the self, who is not interested to be patient, who is not somehow put in check with the wisdom, whether it is, cool to just lose your temper, lose your, temper with aggression, and say something hurtful and do something hurtful, or the self that is actually realizes, yes, you are upset, you are upset, and you are, about to lose your cool and calm state with not just being upset, but lashing out with some sharp words and hurtful things to say and do, that then will of course have its own much of a consequence, and therefore it's not from the wisdom, from the kind of standpoint of whatever the limited wisdom, or from whatever the stability of your mind that can conjure the other alternative, with the wisdom, this is not cool. You have to have a different ways to approach. You have to have a different ways to go forward. You have to have a different tactics or means to go forward. Go forward, and so looking into them, then maybe perhaps you realize, perhaps that you realize, you in the first place have the self, and this self is, quite neurotic. Not just any self, but the self that is about to get, upset and angry, is in the first place quite neurotic. We're not talking about the self that is, functional and, eats and sleeps and cares for one's own kind of a good health and a good state of physical health or mental health, and has a sense of responsibility and looks out for one's own interests and looks out for the interests of others. That kind of a self is actually a healthy self. What we're talking is a self that gets upset and angry, and lashes out. That self is a little bit of a spoiled, neurotic self. Why spoiled, neurotic self? Because it has kind of force that is beyond your control, and it has a temperament that is beyond your control, and it makes you do things beyond your wish. It makes you blindly, get into so much of more suffering that you are trying to address here too. So how could it be, not neurotic in that sense? So let's say, coming back to the point, you want something to happen, it's not happening. So you get a little upset. That's normal, Or you want something not to happen, and it's happening, and you get a little upset. That's normal, But not being able to go beyond that and analyze, what you are about to do or what you are able to do to make a shift and change. If you lose your control, use your awareness and start to do, things that you wish not you have done, and you have done it in the absence of your mindfulness and absence of your, your own better judgment, and you have to say that you are intoxicated by the anger. Anger as, kind of in a alcohol or substance has sort of like a totally taken over you, and you have done it in that state. So, and then you have made the mess, So just being a little upset as a normal versus that much of an upset and that much of an eruption of anger is a very different, very different, very different. So some kind of moderation, if you could have that, why not have all the way moderation? Try to have a moderation, to the point where actually you don't even get upset. If you're really, good at this, Maybe you get upset, but the upset dissolves. Upset is being dependent, upset being conditioned on certain kind of your view and thinking, I want this to happen, and this is not happening, and therefore I'm upset. Who's making the obstacle for this to not happen? Therefore you are, angry at that person, not just only upset, right? So if you take that approach that, what's not happening, maybe as what you wish to happen, maybe is important to you, but it's also equally to be important to take that opportunity to develop patience, and find ways to work with your own mind and your own emotions in this situation to get beyond your usual, addiction to anger, usual addiction to succumb to your anger, So, maybe having a sort of a sense of liberation from that usual kind of rut that you operate, and then having a sort of a new approach. And the new approach would be, well, it's good if it could happen, and it's equally good if it doesn't happen. Sort of an attitude, okay? And if it's good to have, if it's good to happen, good to happen, what do you have to do to make it happen without getting upset and angry? Without sort of like having this sort of a monster inside of you as an anger, an addiction to that, and having always to succumb to that to kind of use as a force or pressure and some kind of like a means to make things happen, Because such kind of ways and means to make things happen may work this time, may work next time, may work, in few cases, but ultimately it becomes a self-destructive, Ultimately it will become a somewhat of not, sustainable, for your own health, mental health, and for the relation, and for the actually situation to be wholesome and good. So if you want it to happen, something, and it's not happening, you have to come up with, skillful means, other skillful means than what you are employing already, Come up with some creative solutions for make this happen, and take the time to sort of, think about what the creative solution would be, and having a sense of, meanwhile, appreciation for the opportunity to work with your own mind and your own state and emotions, and not get upset, or not get at least upset and angry, and get more problems, in one's life and mind in that way. So, another also situation is that you don't want something to happen, and it's happening. And then you are getting upset, and you are getting angry. And who's sort of inflicting, you think, that what you don't want to happen is making it happen in your life, and you are getting upset and angry at the person, Yes, this is true. This is also, preventable, without getting upset, okay, and angry. What does the anger contribute here to make it happen or to make it not happen? Anger doesn't contribute anything. If you don't want it to happen, you have to come creatively another solution for it to be prevented to happen, and taking the time, and then coming up with the solution, and appreciating the opportunity, opportunity, and then feeling a sense of strength inside of you to go with and to, base yourself, then this sort of a monster kind of a gobbling you up, and then, destroying your peace, and then also maybe becoming problematic in your life, in what you're trying to work as well, to something that you don't want it to happen, and it's happening, and you feel somebody is inflicting that on you, So then in this way, what Shantideva states here, if it's in this both ways, if you want something to happen and it's not happening, and somebody is making an obstacle and you are getting upset and angry, okay? Or you don't want something to happen and then it's happening, and you think somebody is bringing this on in your life. Both could be curable or not, you have to think. If it's curable, there's no really reasons to get upset and angry. Maybe upset a little bit in the beginning as a human reaction, but not get angry. Go for the curative measures and curative solutions, creative measures to find the curative solutions, Now, if it is not curable at all, which generally is a lot of the times not the case, generally not the case, then getting angry and getting all self-destructive and lose all your peace of mind and create more problems, more hassles, more complications, burn bridges. That's not going to do anything, right? At least, you could work on yourself, thinking that maybe this is something to do with your own karma. This is something to do with your own previous life's karma, that this is happening and that this is, not happening. And then maybe this is a kind of a purification, a kind of in a situation of, maybe perhaps this time if I'm working with this consciously, and I'm working with this consciously in a very productive way to develop patience, maybe whatever the karma that has been there perpetuating lifetime after lifetime to kind of come back over and over in your life, maybe this time it will be purified once for all. And maybe this will not haunt me again. At least to have that kind of an attitude, and then try to sort of, in your own mind, take the reward of the patience that you are working to go forward, and then enjoy that strength in your life. So, in this way, more and more when we actually examine, there's a lot of many different ways that we can actually find a creative ways to work with our mind and life to be more patient. And so here then we have this,
72 ways how we get, aggravated. And then in the 72 ways, we get sort of like worked up first, aggravated, and then worked up, and then get angry. So you should analyze whether these are true or not in your life. And if they are true, and if you strictly want to kind of get beyond the state of weakness to succumb to your this, addiction to anger, then maybe perhaps, value those studies of the 72 ways how we get aggravated in the first place, and then we get worked up, and then really, the solutions that is been offered also here in a different way of thinking, different way of seeing, different way of valuing, different way of sort of having a sort of a more or inner kind of like rewards than external gains. What's being offered here, you could appreciate them, and then in this way, you could very much, what Shantideva says, be a peaceful person, have a peaceful heart. So in that way, I really hope that this book brings, when we say, somebody recently I read, a great master said, when you are able to work with your pride and arrogance, when you are able to work with your anger and aggression, when those two are sort of, from whatever level that you start, if you are able to bring them down to a sort of not non-existent, but to a minimal level of activities of those two, this is called integration of the Dharma. So I really think this is quite true. Thank you all very much. By this merit may I obtain of nations, may I defeat the enemy wronged from the stormy ways of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of may I free all beings. May Bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it isn't made, never fail, but great. More may Bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it and where it has isn't made, never flourish evermore and more. May Bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has and where it has isn't made, never but go flourish ever more and more. Good night, and thank you all very much for joining us for this launch. And if you read it and if you think it's valuable, just encourage others to also read it as well. Thank you. Good night.